What do you make of that ominous at-bat music?
I don't know. I think people like to add ominous music to technology conferences. They've read too much dystopian sci-fi.
You read a lot of that yourself. Palmer Luckey, you're the face of VR. You invented Oculus Rift, made $2 or $3 billion selling it to Facebook, kicked out of Facebook, and now you are starting again.
I like how you said selling out to Facebook, and then they then corrected it there. But I guess that's somewhat true. But yeah, and now here I am.
So your new company, Onderl, you're trying to reinvent the defense sector.
Correct. So we are a next-generation defense company. We're a defense product company, not a defense contractor. So we build things using our own money. We don't put the risk on taxpayers. We don't go to the government with an idea and say, hey, you should fund this. Tell us how we're going to do it. We work really quickly to work on problems that can be solved right now, today, not decades in the future. So our focus has primarily been on autonomous systems and artificial intelligence and applying that to warfare, which has been a big focus of the Chinese military, of the Russian military, but not so much in the United States. In the United States, we're a lot better at building the iterative things that we already understand. So everybody understands a longer aircraft carrier, a bigger bomber, a faster fighter jet. We're very, very good at getting money to go to those things. It's very hard to convince politicians and voters to understand things like self-healing mesh networks or distributed autonomous systems and just how much of an impact they can make on the way that we fight war.
All right, let's just set the scene a little bit. You're 26. Can you still pass for a boy wonder? When do you age out?
So I don't know, but it's funny, I was just talking with somebody about this. There was someone who a few years ago told me that I better enjoy being a whiz kid because as soon as you turn 30, you're a whiz man, and it just doesn't have the same ring to it. So I don't know. My guess is that as soon as you turn 30, that you don't have the 2 in front of you at the leading edge, and that I don't think it means I'm old, but it probably means I cannot call myself a boy wonder anymore.
All right. So it's 2015. There's a picture of you in the Wall Street Journal. You're wearing an Oculus Rift headset and you're wearing flip-flops, perhaps those very flip-flops. How is your thinking about the world different today than it was when that picture was taken in 2015?
Let's see. I think the main thing is that I'm a lot more concerned about external factors. I spent a lot of time in the tech industry, mostly worrying about competition from inside the tech industry, competition from other people that we're working with, even really like internal problems and competition within my own company between various groups who thought different things were the right path. One of the things that I've realized over the last few years is that the biggest threats to my company and to really, I think, the United States technology space actually come from outside of the United States. It's Russia, it's China, it's the way that they're interfering with our tech companies, it's the way that they're stealing our IP, it's the way that they're copying a lot of their technology and working on it in ways that, while very fast and very productive, are not necessarily ethical. And I'm very concerned about the fact that so many US companies are not recognizing this threat, and that they're focusing so much on the day-to-day bubble inside of Silicon Valley that they're not looking at a broader level where the real threats are.
You've thought a lot about that Silicon Valley bubble. There was an Economist cover last month, Peak Valley. You just signed a massive lease nearby in Orange County. Why are you outside the valley?
So, just for background, I started Oculus in Orange County, Southern California. We were there for a couple years. We ended up moving up to Silicon Valley after Facebook acquired us, and then I spent a few years in the valley, and I learned a lot during that experience. But the most important thing I learned is that if you're an enterprise software company, 99% of your customers and 99% of your recruiting base are in Silicon Valley, absolutely you should be there, even though it's expensive, even though it's got crazy regulations, even though it is going to cost, you might get 1 year in Silicon Valley versus 2 years in Southern California if you look at how much money it costs to pay your workforce and to have space. But if you're not that type of company, if you're doing any kind of serious manufacturing, if you are doing shipping and receiving and inventory and you need loading docks and you're actually doing real work like that, you really can't afford to be in Silicon Valley. It only makes sense for a tiny number of people. And a lot of people that are in Silicon Valley today are there through inertia, not because they made a reasoned decision. Most of the companies there, I think if they were to start from scratch and decide where they're going to be, given their size and clout, and if they could just write off inertia, I think that very few of them would be staying in Silicon Valley.
And do you expect to stay in Orange County for good? Like, what is your plan for Onderl?
Yeah, we're planning on staying in Orange County for good. I mean, we may end up with offices in other places. Like we have an office in Washington, D.C., because obviously we have to spend a lot of time working with the government. But we're going to be in Orange County for the primary core of the team.
And you have engaged with D.C. more than others. I think tech is beginning to realize that D.C. is an inevitability in their life. How do you see the relationship evolving between big tech and D.C.?
Oh, man. So I think that the relationship you're going to see is that you're going to have tech companies that are spending a lot more time thinking about DC. They're going to probably have significant offices in DC because they're starting to realize that they can't. I mean, it's what I talked about earlier. So many companies are focused on just the Silicon Valley bubble. What's inside this little circle right around Silicon Valley, and they're not paying attention to what's happening in DC. They're not paying attention to what is happening in a lot of foreign governments either. And I think that you're going to have people paying more attention to what our government is doing, and they're going to be paying attention to what other governments around the world are doing. Because remember, these companies generally think of themselves as international corporations. They're operating everywhere. They have to worry about the EU. They have to worry about, in many cases, whether they should or not, the Chinese government. They're going to have to be thinking a lot about government no matter where they are.
Should Facebook be regulated more?
I mean, I'm a libertarian-leaning Republican, so my default answer is that the market will provide the solution to whatever problem could possibly occur. But I think that it could be that some regulation makes sense on specific things. I think that the government has a responsibility to protect certain freedoms, and that you're going to see that applied to some of these tech companies. As to what the exact right way to do that is, I don't know. I'm not a policy guy. I don't make policy. I make technology.
Now, you're talking about the Silicon Valley bubble, and you've talked a lot about inside that bubble, the ideological dissent and the ideological sameness. You ran afoul of that in a big way. Tell us what happened.
Sure. So I gave money to a group that was against Hillary Clinton, and then everyone hated me.
It was for Donald Trump.
And that as well, yes. Although specifically, they ran an anti-Hillary billboard. That's actually all they did. So it's.
But it was pro-Trump. You voted for Trump.
Correct. And at least a lot of people would imagine that. They think that They think that the Silicon Valley is just full of these radical, crazy people that are unable to accept any kind of ideological differences. To be honest, after my time in the Valley, I realized that there actually is a huge breadth of ideological diversity in Silicon Valley. What you don't get is ideological diversity on the surface of Silicon Valley. You have a lot of people who are working in these tech companies. They want to do good work, and they focus not on using their job to make a point. They use their job to make a difference and actually make stuff. It's a very small vocal minority that is standing up and writing open letters about how shitty their boss is, and going out there and talking about how so-and-so is a terrible person, and such and such party everyone in it is a racist. I mean, that's actually not common in Silicon Valley. It's just a few people that are controlling the dialogue, and it's unfortunate because whether you're talking about the press or people or recruiting or even the United States government, there ends up being this perception that all of Silicon Valley is anti-military, anti-defense, that they don't live in the real world. And the reality is that it's actually just a very small number of people in Silicon Valley who don't live in the real world.
Now, you had $2.3 billion in Facebook stock and $700 million in cash to cushion your exit from Facebook, but you were basically fired.
Yes.
You were fired.
It was not my decision to leave. Make of that what you will.
What do you think of Mark Zuckerberg?
I don't think we should talk about that.
What do you think of him as a leader?
Look, he's built something incredible with Facebook. He, to his credit, really understands the potential for virtual reality, and he understood it at a time when very few other tech leaders saw it. The acquisition of Oculus by Facebook legitimized the VR industry. It is absolutely the best thing that could have happened to the VR industry, regardless of whether it was good for me, Palmer Luckey. And so whatever other thoughts I may have, I can't have any kind of regrets about the way that things went, at least then.
Now, you were telling me backstage that VR is doing better than we think. You said that people have a false impression from the zeitgeist about how VR is doing. This is the literal zeitgeist. So tell us why VR is misunderstood.
So there's two things. First of all, the average person in America doesn't care about VR one way or the other. They don't have any opinion, whether it's doing well or not. They just don't care at all. The people in this room probably are following it slightly more closely. What we were talking about is how a lot of people think that VR is not moving as quickly as it could have or as it should have. But the reality is, like, current generation virtual reality headsets are outselling the iPhone at the same point in its lifespan. It's doing fantastic. And something else we were talking about, when Oculus was acquired by Facebook, there was actually some performance-based bonuses that were based on different levels of sales and engagement. And not only did we hit the top level of those, we actually surpassed it, and we did it a year before the deadline. I mean, VR is doing really, really well. What people can't do is try to compare it to existing mature technologies and say, oh, it's not selling as well as the iPhone is, therefore it's nothing.
All right, tell us about your battlefield of the future.
Sure. So, it's not just about Battlefield. It's really about giving first responders, particularly in the military, perfect situational awareness. Our core product is...
So I'm a soldier. What does that look like for me?
Sure. So what our core product Lattice does is take data from thousands of different sensors, and it merges it into a single cohesive real-time 3D model of very large spaces. And then it tags everything in that model using machine learning with metadata so that we can sort it, filter it, process it, run predictive analysis on it, and then pipe relevant data to people who are on the field, whether they're protecting a power plant or an airport or a military base or participating in some active ongoing operation. So what that means is, like, if I'm a soldier, I'm going to have relevant information about what's going on in the battlefield piped directly to my mobile device or heads-up display so that I can see exactly where overlaid directly into my view, I can see where my buddies are, where the enemy is, where my air support is. And even if there's a building in the way or a mountain in the way, I'm still going to be able to see it, essentially giving soldiers superpowers to make them far more effective at doing their job.
How many years away is that?
Oh, I mean, it's already happening right now in small-scale trials. The real question is how long it's going to take for every single person in the military to be using this type of technology. And I think the benefit is so great. The value is so immense, and we're already seeing this in trials, that it's actually going to happen a lot sooner than people think. I think within 24 months, you're going to see very large-scale fielding of this type of technology. Because we were talking about this too, with a person, like a normal consumer using an augmented reality display. You have to convince that person that it does something way better than their phone. And you're probably not going to wear an AR headset if it makes your Facebook experience 5% better than it currently is. Even if it's 20% better, you're probably not going to wear some silly set of goggles on your face. But if you're in the military and you can improve people's performance by 20%, you're going to wear whatever the hell that is that's giving them a 20% advantage over the enemy. And if you can give them a 100% or 200% advantage, which I absolutely believe you can do, then it's a no-brainer. The military understands the value of this technology, and they've wanted it for a very long time.
How is your virtual border wall going to work?
So the way that it works is the same that it would work for securing any place. So, like,
and tell us exactly where it's at. Paint the picture. Like, what are you trying to do? What are you doing?
Sure. So we're basically deploying a bunch of autonomous sensor technology that it's solar powered. It does all the processing out at the edge of the network. All these sensors are deployed out in the field. They communicate with each other.
Where is the field in this case?
So there's a few different deployment sites. We're deployed at a few U.S. military bases. We're deployed at 2 sites along the U.S. southern border. We're deployed in a few other places I can't talk about. But in all those cases, the goal is to give people perfect situational awareness, to know what's crossing through an area, what's in an area, and the best way to respond to it, so that you can do triage, you can go into a situation with the right level of kind of alarm, not be going in everything as if it's a massive threat. I think that the United States does a really good job, especially the military, of making better decisions when they have more information. So we're trying to give them more information so they can make better decisions.
And this is partly where you run afoul of Silicon Valley. It's basically to keep people out.
Well, so I don't know. I think that a lot of people look at the border problem in a bit of a skewed way. I think a lot of people disagree on immigration policy. They disagree with who should be coming in, how they should be coming in, and what that process should be. It's not actually a lot of people that believe that we should enforce those policy disagreements through having no idea what's going on the border. I mean, border security has been bipartisan for decades. Everyone can agree that we don't want human trafficking, we don't want weapons coming in, we don't want drugs coming in, and you have to understand what's happening on the border in order to make those decisions. What people want is a difference in policy, and any good policy is going to depend on having information about what's happening. It's very rare that good policy comes out of having no idea what the problem is or how to solve it, or what the impact of it is. So I think people in Silicon Valley often confuse the two, and they'll assume that having better border security means necessarily that you have to have some certain immigration policy. And I think the two are very separate issues.
What is your view of the Trump administration's no-tolerance policy, which has resulted in child separations?
So, look, I don't agree with everything the administration does. That's a very complex issue, too, because it's a combination of policy changes and past court rulings that required things to be handled a certain way. I mean, if you decide that you're going to enforce the law and then the laws on the books are not what people want, people should go to the ballot box. They should vote. They should have a dialogue about that. What you don't want to do is try to affect policy changes through crippling the people who are tasked with enforcing those policies. You shouldn't say, hey, they shouldn't know what's going on the border because I don't like the laws that exist around the border.
So basically 4.
No, I mean, like, again, it's a complex issue too, because like, without getting too much into the weeds, like some of the stuff around why children had to be separated from people who had been charged with a crime was a result of court rulings that did not happen under the Trump administration. So when they decided to start enforcing the law and to charge people who are crossing the border, that was a natural result. It was not a change in policy. And I would actually like to see those policies change. Like, I'm a fan of immigration. I like the idea of having more immigration into the United States. But I also am a believer in strong borders and not having people come across through places that we have no idea what's happening.
Now, there's a lot of concern in this room about our phones and how much we spend on them, the dopamine that leads us there. You told me that you think that is overplaced. You said that in the long run, that will be viewed like swing music, comic books, and rock and roll, a very big worry about not a big problem. How so?
I think that society will adapt. I think that there are problems. Like, no person who understands these issues with technology is going to say that technology has no implications and that we're not going to have to worry about it and that we're not going to have to think carefully about it. But I do think that society will adapt and that there's a lot of hand-wringing over things that are not necessarily a real problem. And if you look back in history, there's just so many examples, whether it's comic books or swing music or rock and roll. I mean, there was a point where people thought that novels were going to destroy the fabric of society, and that the only written word should be that of the Bible. And I obviously don't think that the printing press turned out too bad for humanity. It seems to have worked pretty well.
Do you think we spend too much time on our phones?
I think some people absolutely spend too much time on our phones, and these applications are designed to keep you engaged on essentially an addictive level where you keep coming back to it, keep getting another hit of dopamine. And some people are more susceptible than others. Some people abuse it more than others. But at the end of the day, it's the people who are using the technology. It's the technology's not forcing people to use it. And so I think you'll see more and more thinking around responsible use of technology. I don't think that means that it's going to go away.
The most intriguing thing that I've heard you say, and one of the reasons that you think ultimately that will be seen as a small problem, is you said, we're going to end up living huge chunks of our lives in virtual spaces. Unpack that for us.
Sure. I mean, we already do it. We just live in low fidelity virtual spaces. When you spend hours on Facebook or Instagram, like you're already engaging with a digital world over the real world, and I think the fidelity is going to continue to increase. I think there's so many interactions that can happen in virtual reality, whether it's for entertainment, like if you want to experience anything, VR is a great tool. If you want to communicate with somebody on the other side of the world, it's a great tool. If you want to really understand large sets of data, and if you want to make better decisions on the battlefield about how to allocate resources and how to move them around, it's also a great tool. I mean, VR allows you to experience anything and do anything, and it is going to be the final medium. It's the only medium that can replicate every past human medium of experience and also be its own set.
Wait, so that's a great tweet, a great headline. The final medium is?
Oh, for virtual reality. I mean, look, if you look at, nobody would look at books and say, oh, I can imagine how books will someday advance to the point where they're the medium that replaces all other forms of technology. Nobody would say that about music. Nobody would say that probably about paintings. But virtual reality is the only medium that can simulate every single other medium and combinations of different mediums, and also its own full set of experiences that can't be had any other way. For that reason, it's hard to imagine something beyond virtual reality.
Paul Allen says that in the 21st century, rather than 100 years of progress, we'll have more like 20,000 years of progress. Do you think things are going too fast? Like AR, AI, VR, machine learning, this could end badly.
I think that people way over-index on the dystopian aspect of technology. Like, we've been trained by science fiction that technology has these deep, dark impacts on society that's going to lead to the ruin of society. Like, I'm a big VR guy. In Ready Player One, novel by Ernest Cline, recently adapted into a film. Virtual reality is one of the reasons the world falls into this economic collapse and becomes this dystopia. But if you actually talk to Ernest Cline, he doesn't believe that that's going to happen. It's a great way to tell a story, and like telling a story about how technology is going to ruin the world is very interesting to think about, and I think it keeps us cautious to a healthy degree. But I actually think the future is going to be in many ways more boring than people think. I don't think technology is going to lead to a immediate post-scarcity utopia. I also don't think it's going to destroy the planet. I think humanity is going to remain largely the same, and we're just going to have a lot of different tools that we're using.
A question from our hosts and guests: are there possibilities for your technologies to be used in contact sports, NFL?
That's something I had not really thought about that.
You're thinking of a new market here.
I'm trying to think if it would make sense. I mean, one thing we have thought about is how this type of technology could apply to things like people who are driving ships or aircraft or vehicles, being able to overlay this information out into their field of view and allow them to make better decisions. I haven't thought about contact sports. It seems like you'd probably have to come up with a new contact sport that allows this type of technology, because most sports are pretty traditional in how they regulate these things. Like, I would love to see like super cyborg football, where everyone is a gigantic cyborg and the field is 3 times as big and they're running at 100 miles an hour. So maybe this would be a good fit for something like that.
That sounds like that could be a good business.
Oh, I think it'd be super cool. I'm not going to do it because it's not something that I would be good at doing, but it sounds pretty cool.
So in the December Vanity Fair, Nick Bilton had a piece, will technology have its Me Too moment?
Will technology have its Me Too moment?
There's clearly been a lot more impact so far in media than there has been in politics or business or tech. Does tech have it coming?
I don't know. Like, that's one of those cultural wins things. Like, there's been a million events in the past where that stuff could have blown up and didn't. There's been stuff recently where it did blow up. It's very hard to figure out if and when something is going to achieve that level of virality as an idea.
Well, you're not saying this is just another cultural win. This is a hinge, no question.
This is a what?
This is a hinge. Like, this is more than a wind.
Oh, sure. I guess what I'm saying is, the idea of a Me Too moment, as opposed to just being part of the overall landscape, like that implies that there's like
using it as a proxy. But to what degree do you think that tech should or needs to or is going to have to address diversity issues, the treatment of women?
I mean, I think that you're already seeing technology doing a pretty good job of doing all those things. Like, I think that things are actually. I think things are going along pretty well there. Like, people understand the problem. It's not this idea that nobody has thought about. It's not something that I am super equipped to unpack and predict exactly how it's going to go. I'm not sure how it's going to go. It's a very challenging problem. It's a very multifaceted problem. But I do think that people understand it and see it as a problem.
And when you say that tech is helping solve it, in what sense is that?
Well, I think like one of the things that I like about the technology space is it is a space where I think there is acceptance of all kinds of different people. Like, it doesn't matter what the color of your skin is, it doesn't matter what your gender is. There is really a push towards accepting people on the basis of the work that they can do and how they can do it. And of course, there's always pockets where that's not the case. There's always pockets of people who have bias against somebody for various reasons. But I do think tech is actually a lot better than most industries. I think you're seeing a lot of attention on technology and like its problems in that industry. But I think there's a lot of industries where you're not seeing that kind of focus at all.
The Oscars music are playing. Penultimate question: will you vote to re-elect Trump in 2020?
Yes.
To what degree has he disappointed you? What's something he's done that you disagree with?
Well, let's see. So, like, for example, I was not a fan of the policy where it was a country-based immigration restriction. I didn't think that was a great thing. But when it comes to the things, whether it's like the economy or not getting involved in wars overseas, kind of limiting our intervention to when we really need to get involved, like those were two really key important things for me. And I feel like those are going pretty well. And if those things keep going, I'm going to be really glad that we're not going around and getting involved in a massive way in the Middle East.
And as we say goodbye, Palmer, it was only very recently that you were kicked out of the group house.
Well, not kicked out of the group house. What happened is I lived with a whole bunch of people when I was at Oculus, and we were all a bunch of engineers. And then over time, as we attracted girlfriends and then fiancés, there started to be this kind of feeling that we were not going to keep being able to live in this group house of guys together building cool technology in our dining room that we converted into a machine shop. And yeah, it kind of spun apart mutually.
And so you're getting married July 4th, 2019. What's the plan for the wedding?
We're going to get married.
Palmer Luckey, thank you very much.
Thank you, man.
Thank you.